It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Today I'm joined by Cherie Clark from Purview Life NWA, an aging life care practice that acts like a general contractor for healthcare, coordinating assessments, resources, and even stepping in as a medical POA or guardian when families need it most. If you're navigating care for an aging parent or an adult with special needs, especially from a distance, this episode is for you. And, I'm so glad that Cherie reached out to me and her team and wanted to kind of tell their story, because none of us are getting any younger. And I think it's always good to know what resources are actually available. So I'm so glad that she agreed to come on the podcast and kind of share her story with us and tell us all about Purview and the amazing work that they're doing both here and elsewhere throughout the country. So, Cherie Clark, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Good. So listen, in a nutshell, can you just tell us about Purview Life and what you guys actually do?
Sure. Yeah. You covered a lot of the basics, which I appreciate. But to get into a little bit more detail, we are overall care management for individuals, which also coincides with support services for family caregivers, spouses, even neighbors and church friends that are like, I really care about this person. We're friends, we're connected, and I help and I assist them the most I can, but I can't do everything. And families find themselves in that position a lot. So there's plenty of statistics out there about family caregivers and caregiver burnout, and the fact that we can be so individual with a person, whatever season they may be in, is a great support to family caregivers, or we could be the sole support system for an individual. If you're talking about an older adult, they may have outlived their spouse. They may have never had children. They may have family, but they're out of state. And so when we talk about care management, we coin it aging life care management for a reason. It's life-centric, it's holistic. It's not only navigating through the healthcare system or serving in those legal roles like a legal guardian or a medical POA, but it's those support services as well of what happens when severe weather, comes through our area and we've got a tree down in the backyard, how do we maintain the space that we're in? How do we get to appointments? How do we supply transportation and a support system to someone? So it's very life-centric, and it's a great resource that's very broad in concept. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but it's something really exciting that we feel really blessed that we've been able to bring it here specifically to Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. What specifically for you, because I always like to, let our listeners know that there is a human being behind that microphone that they're listening to. But tell me, what drew you to caregiving 14 years ago and what keeps you in it today?
Sure. Yeah. I was a family caregiver. I was part of the support system for my grandmother years ago. And then at the same time that we were navigating through the last couple of years of her life, my aunt at the age of 50 came down with a cancer diagnosis of soft tissue sarcoma. So then we found ourselves navigating through someone more middle-aged and the hospice process and treatments and resources into the home while dealing with my grandmother, who was mid-80s in age with a dementia diagnosis, and everything from trying to let her live independently to then assisted to facility care, also hospice care on and off, and I really feel like we were all, me especially, was put into that role to learn the landscape and get a personal experience of what that season and what that journey looks like. Little did I know that it would throw me into doing this professionally. And now for the last 14 years with more ongoing training and lots of experience and lots of still learning from every client that I've ever served or ever helped in our community. Here we are with Purview Life. So I found myself in 2021 finally getting back into the healthcare scene after the pandemic and still feeling I was working in non-medical home care at the time and still felt like I was helping people, but I couldn't do everything. I still was running into dead ends of you don't have someone to make your medical decisions. You don't have someone, again, overseeing the big picture. We're bringing in companion care to help you bathe and cook meals and maybe get to appointments, but there was still a stop point to those services. And so once I learned about Purview Life, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the big picture concept. Like, I can't figure out one thing that they can't do, oversee, problem solve, or anything like that. So I first thought, man, I have found a great resource. And then when I looked into my own heart and my own professional journey, I thought, oh, I've been put in this position for a reason. And I'm ready to climb back up to the mountaintops and shout this out to our community. I'm a Northwest Arkansas native. I was born in the Springdale Hospital, grew up in Bentonville my whole life. This community is so much a part of me. And to be able to bring this all-encompassed resource right here to the 479, I mean, that was a blessing by itself, much less the many, many client stories I could tell you just in the last 3.5 years that we've been able to bring this to the community.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can hear your passion in your voice, and I'm sure our listeners will hear that as well. And I love how you reflect the 479. And I'm going to come back to you specifically to ask about your view of Northwest Arkansas, because I know I remember when I first started this podcast 6 years ago, one of the things that I learned about Northwest Arkansas was that this was a destination for retirees. So you actually have a lot of people relocating here in their older stages of life that say, oh, I love the change of seasons. The weather is a little bit milder and it's just a great place to be. And so you have a lot of different people that are moving to Northwest Arkansas for a variety of reasons. Of course, we know about the younger people that are coming for work and all of that. But then again, there is a whole different generation of folks that are finding their way to Northwest Arkansas. And honestly, some of those people are people that would be individuals that you could potentially eventually serve down the road as well. So I just think it's a perfect storm of opportunities for Purview and for the work that you're doing. So for our audience, why don't you just maybe walk us through, because I know that on your website, it says that, Purview looks at themselves as a general contractor for healthcare. So can you walk us through maybe a typical case from intake to what we might call stability, or you getting an individual to a place where everything's kind of flowing smoothly and there's not the chaos that sometimes exists when dealing with healthcare initiatives for an individual?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head for most of our cases. Of course, every phone call is an individual person and it's a individual situation and it's an individual season that they're going through. But you covered it pretty perfectly. Of a lot of times we may get folks in crisis mode. We may get folks. I took a referral just this week of a husband that has been the primary caregiver and overseeing everything for his wife for the last 2 or 3 years. He literally said on the phone to me when we talked earlier this week that this is not a surprise. This has been a long time coming. And for him particularly, he was finally reaching out for help because he's like, this is now above and beyond what I can do. And then there's the human compassion part of it as well. Of again, it is so easy to slip from child or spouse, or again, neighbor, church friend, whatever role you serve with someone, to slip out of that into full-time caregiver and full-time care manager. Again, you're managing things that's going on in their day-to-day life, or at least overseeing it, on top of hospitalizations, then transfer to rehab facilities, or when is it time for facility care and we can no longer be in the home anymore. And, again, with adults with special needs, I hear the parents say all the time, no one's going to care for my child with special needs as good as I can. I'm like, okay, That's understandable and probably an absolute true fact. But what's your backup plan? I have to live forever is what they say, and I'm thinking that's an admirable goal. Okay. But it's not a realistic goal, so where is the backup plan, and where's the support and the assistance to make sure you don't find yourself overwhelmed or you keep pushing through that role when you finally come to a point where you're overwhelmed. And so that is what I love about our services. They are very flexible. There may be a lot of work on the front end. Once we get that phone call, we have to assess the situation. We have to assess where everyone who's involved and where they're at, almost like making a master to-do list at the very beginning, maybe a care plan, maybe a cognitive assessment, maybe a home safety assessment, maybe a high-level consultation where we just, again, come in and get that huge overview, that snapshot of what's happening right now. And there may be work on the front end, and then things can be maintained after that. Again, you have to think about like a construction project. You want to build a home, you want to build a structure, you've found your plot of land, you've picked out your plans, you know what you want to accomplish. And now it's time to retain that general contractor that's going to oversee the entire project. He's not going to call the roofers in when the dirt work is still being done, and you don't then have to manage all of those moving parts either. He's going to know what resource to execute when to make sure the project goes smoothly from start to finish, even though, things are going to come up in the project itself along the way as well. And so we bring a lot of expertise, objectivity to the table when we work with folks, mediate, family relations and decisions. One thing that my care managers are excellent at is managing emotions and expectations. We understand that even though we have that general contractor analogy, this isn't just a building project. This just isn't a product that we're trying to place in someone's life to make things easier for them. These are hard conversations to have, whether you're talking to an individual 18 years and up, or you're talking to a senior, that may be looking more at end of life care. It's a very sensitive thing what we do, and we walk into sensitive situations. And so sometimes it is even just a benefit to have that care manager in the wings or part of the support system, because there's a lot of emotions and expectations, a lot of hard conversations to have, a lot of hard decisions to make. This is a really important role to even just step in, whether we're the sole provider or we're trying to support the family caregivers and the individual.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that I'm sure people come to you and feel like, oh, these guys have a magic wand and they can just fix everything overnight. But the reality, it sounds like, just with your case managers and everybody else, that it takes a lot. And I love the analogy that you use of a general contractor, right? Because people wonder why some building projects work phenomenally well and why some don't. And typically the ones that work phenomenally well are with the GCs or general contractors that have really solid relationships with the subcontractors, that have the ability to communicate effectively. So when you take that whole dynamic and you shift it over into the healthcare space, where, there are so many moving parts, there's so many people to contact. And sometimes for people, it can be overwhelming. Just like what you said about that older gentleman, it can be overwhelming, or it can be overwhelming for a parent that's getting older, but has a special needs adult child, and they want to make sure that they're well taken care of. And it's like, well, who do I call? There's no like one number in the phone book that I can just ring up and my problems will instantly be solved.
You are correct. And so I love what you said at the beginning of that. We are all aging, we're all one life-changing event away from having to navigate or make decisions in a landscape that we never thought we would find ourselves in. So we could spend a lot of time, talking about all the scenarios and the what ifs. But when it comes to aging, or we're one accident away from our life changing, or we just know down the road, we're not always going to be young and mobile or have our cognitive levels at their peak. It's almost like a dripping faucet in the background. We know we need to prepare for these things. We need to know that we have to think about the what ifs. And then when those things happen, Now you're standing in front of a fire hydrant trying to take a sip of water, and it is overwhelming. And Purview Life, or even a care manager in general, is like the fire department showing up with that big crazy wrench, and slowing the flow of that fire hydrant, going, okay, no, I promise you we can manage through this. And they bring a lot of compassion, a lot of objectivity, and a lot of expertise to the table, to where now we can organize what's most important to least important. Let's just organize everything, and we start with one thing at a time. And that I've literally been on the phone with folks or have met with them in person, and they literally take a sigh of relief. I hear them, and I'm like, okay, because now you're not alone. And not only are you not alone, but we bring all of that expertise. My care managers are local right here to Northwest Arkansas. We know the area inside and out. We know every facility. We know what level of care they provide. We have walked in there and smelled the place, looked at the place, saw the residents there, know the staff, connected with the staff. And that's same for clinics and hospitals and home care and home health and everything that, again, you're like, okay, I'm trying to care for my family member. And you go to Google, or you go for a place for mom, or care.com, or these big search engines that are going to give you a ton of information. And then you're bombarded by phone calls and information, and everybody's trying to get their kickback. And now you're standing in front of the fire hydrant, when really just consulting with a care manager from the very beginning can slow the flow, organize most important to least important, work on one thing at a time, support while we go, and bring our expertise to the table of, we don't need to call 10 different home care companies. We can recommend 2 or 3 that we know are specialized in your need, or educate families on the right resource or not, especially when it comes to, again, we're not licensed attorneys. We're not Medicare insurance providers. We're not financial advisors, but even in those areas as well, because it all coincides, we know just enough to be dangerous. And we're so well connected in the community that when those conversations are needed, legally, financially, insurance-wise, whatever, we can help folks even get connected to the resources to get even more education and be even more prepared as they navigate through whatever journey we happen to find them in. So starting with your care manager is step number 1, and then we go from there. And I promise you, it is a much smoother process than trying to stand straight in front of that fire hydrant and hope to catch a little bit of water in your cup.
Yeah. Well, and as I think about that, and you talked about a care manager, I mean, first of all, these people have to be excellent listeners. They have to operate with empathy. And like you said, they have to be skilled and connected with other people in the community that serve the overarching needs that a potential client would have. So you guys get a chance to coordinate across medical, legal, home care resources to solve a lot of the crisis that will potentially present themselves to a family going through that, or dealing with an aging parent, or dealing with an adult child with special needs. And so I think it's important to talk about. But what I'd love to know is, I know you guys are affiliated with the ALCA. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that ties into the North Star that you follow from a professional standards practice with the ALCA, which is the Aging Life Care Association, and how that helps guide a lot of what you guys do at Purview.
It is. It's a national association that oversees other care management companies across the nation. We all follow the same ethics. We all follow the same continuing education. When you say, guiding star, you couldn't use a better example, not only from what we do, within our practice, but being able to be connected to everyone else in that association has been a huge benefit. And it's been a huge benefit when we talk about Northwest Arkansas specifically. So one of my goals here in Northwest Arkansas is not only to continue to grow Purview Life and have individuals in our community use it as the resource that they need. But I could see this being a huge asset for our local fire and police departments when they get the same call for the same individuals over and over again. I know Siloam Springs specifically has a service that comes and assists when there's been a fall, or the caregiver can't lift the person up or transport them or whatnot. And then our school systems with all of our teachers, we can't be having our teachers, get substitutes and have to run out to their family members and their, step into that caregiver role while they're trying to teach. The large corporations and all the vendors that we have in our community, this is not only a great resource for them here in Northwest Arkansas, but I mention this to say, because we're part of that national association, Aging Life Care Association, solo practitioners and other companies across the nation, just like us with Purview Life, it does not matter if you're here in Northwest Arkansas or you're somewhere else in the country. We can connect you with an aging life care manager. We can give you these resources wherever you are and wherever your family is across the country. And so I find it a huge benefit to be part of that national association, especially since we're in this melting pot that Northwest Arkansas is, because the parent may be living here and the child may be in another state or vice versa, and then it may even be the conversation of, should I move my mom here? Okay, well, we can help with that too. And so we've gotten on planes and picked people up and brought them back or saw them to their destination. So it's multifaceted. And I feel like we have the opportunity to expand our services even outside of our immediate area because of that association. And I've been able to attend their national conference that they do once a year. We always have, continuing education and Zoom calls with other providers across the country. And so it's just one zip code search away from being able to tap in to a much larger resource that does these same services, follows the same ethics, the same continuing education, and continuing to, again, be that big picture of a resource for folks, no matter what situation or season they find themselves in.
Yeah. I mean, everything that you just said makes a lot of sense. And I want to piggyback on what you mentioned as you talked about Northwest Arkansas and some of the things that you're seeing here. What unique patterns do you see in NWA, like example, adult children living out of state? How do you bridge that gap locally for people here, specifically in Northwest Arkansas?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're even speaking to a referral that we just took this week, thanks to a local organization here in Northwest Arkansas that connected to the neighbor of the lady we need to help. But the lady we need to help has 3 daughters and 2 live in Illinois and 1 lives in Arizona. And so we already know, no matter what's going on with mom, and we are dealing with a hospitalization and a discharge to a rehab facility, and then the whole conversation on, is it safe for her to return to the home or not? We're suffering with a limited mobility. We're wondering if there's some legitimate cognitive issues. They're trying to sort all of this, especially the daughter that I spoke to specifically, who's in Arizona. She is 2 time zones away. She woke up at 6:30 in the morning to call me at 8:30 in the morning, my time, and have this conversation and lay out everything that they're trying to navigate with their mom. And so we talked a lot of things about retaining our services so we can be focused on mom since we're here locally, and keeping them, thank goodness to technology nowadays, phone, text, Zoom calls, whatever, they can still be connected without physically being here. But then we also talked about legal guardianships and what that would look like even if they held that role and were the agent to the guardian since we're here locally, or if we need to hold that guardianship so they can step back more into the role of daughter as opposed to legal guardian or caregiver or decision maker. And so it's kind of a beautiful service that really, depending on the situation and the needs, where there's a will, there's a way. We can make it work. It doesn't matter if you're across the country or if you're just across town. We work plenty of referrals. Again, the husband that I mentioned that's trying to care for his wife, they're all right here in Northwest Arkansas, but he's a local business owner. He has a very well-known restaurant in downtown Springdale that keeps him busy. 10, 12, 15 hours a day, and he cannot close his establishment to continue to go and physically show up for his wife. He can't put all of that on his staff. Depending on what his day-to-day looks like, he absolutely needs a secondhand man. He needs that support that we would step in just like he would, and we'll coordinate and make sure that we're all on the same page for decisions and whatever we need ongoing. But it doesn't matter if they're right here across town or if they're right here across or they're right across the country. That's those support services and that navigation and that boots on the ground. It's right here with Purview Life.
Yeah. You're really kind of laying it out, and I appreciate the examples that you're sharing, whether it would be this gentleman that you just started working with, or just somebody, a listener that's listening to this, that's thinking, man, how do I find somebody or vet a provider, right? What would you say to them in terms of how do they make sure that people aren't promising them the moon and then delivering them something that's just a lot less? Because I could see how that would be, right? Because everybody, when you think of like elder care specifically, but just health, any type of healthcare proxy care in general, people think a dollar signs start popping up right away. And it's like, oh man, there's a lot of tremendous opportunity here to make money. And I do want to ask you about your business model in a minute, but I specifically want to ask about how should someone vet a provider so that they know that they're getting someone that's solid and it's going to really look after their best interest. You've already talked about a ACLA, which having that type of connection, ALCA, which having that type of connection means that these organizations follow a standard. But I would just be curious from your perspective, with your time involved in this industry, what would you say to somebody if they asked you, how should I vet somebody to make sure they're going to provide the services that I need?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. I love that because, again, I'm going to go back to that general contractor analogy. You are welcome to Google and make phone calls and interview and find those resources yourself, or you can call an expert who's well-versed in the industry. We know the good companies. We know the bad companies. We know the ones that are kind of mediocre. We know the ones that fit your needs specifically. We're always going to bring options to the table. We're going to bring objectivity. We are not in partnership with anyone specifically when it comes to any kind of resource in Northwest Arkansas. We do not get kickbacks. We're not in partnership with anyone specifically. We are literally coming to the table focused on our client and the support system that may be in place that we're supporting, and bring options and education straight to the table on this is what you need, this is what you don't need. So it could be one of two things. You're either going to have to interview and vet those resources yourself and pick the right one, or you may be on a tangent for in-home care services when really you need home health services. You really need physical therapy over just a companion. So even bringing education on what an individual needs or what's appropriate right now, especially when we're talking about cost. So I love it when we are able to work with a family or an individual and educate them even on what types of services are out there, what's covered by insurance, what's considered medical, what's considered non-medical, what are we going to have to pay out of pocket as opposed to be covered by Medicare or insurance. The Medicaid process. Oh my goodness, everybody's got questions about Medicaid. What does that look like? How do we get on it? What does that cover? We're well versed in that. We know when to apply for it. We know when not to. We know how you'll get onto it. We know how long it'll take. Like we can walk folks and handhold them through almost every question and scenario that may come up, while again, offering that expertise and navigating that we don't need this resource yet, but we need this other one in place. Oh, well, I didn't even think about that. Glad you pointed us in the right direction. That's why sometimes when we start working with folks, there may be a lot of work on the front end, but then things can be maintained, ongoing. But then now you still have an expert in your back pocket, waiting on in the wings, especially if anything changes down the road. And now we have to rehash the conversation, maybe bring in more resources, maybe do a transition in care. And you have, again, like that general contractor that knows the industry, knows who to call, knows who not to call, and can get the job done efficiently and especially cost effective.
Yeah. My mind is racing now because I actually have an elderly mother and, she lives on her own. She lives with her, she lives near other siblings of hers in Pittsburgh. But, I'm constantly thinking about it, and I talk about it with my wife, like, oh man, what am I going to do when, or what am I going to do if? And, I just don't have any of the answers for that. Right. I mean, I know what I know, and I also know what I don't know. And I think what I don't know is how to navigate that process, in a way that will bring honor to my mother as my birth parent, and, somebody that, you're supposed to honor your mother and your father, right? That's what it says. So, I try to follow that tenet. I'm as good of a son as there can be, I would think. But I guess, that the verdict is still out because, I know in the back of my mind, oh, there are some things that I'm probably going to have to do down the road to ensure that, the latter years of my mother's are as fruitful and as high of a quality as they can be. And I think that's what people really need to be thinking about, right? It's not so much, oh, I just have to solve a problem. It's like, well, the biggest thing is just making sure that quality of life, because I'm thinking, what do I want my kids to do for me when I'm that age, or when I get, above 80 or 85, depending on, whether I'm infirmed or whether I'm actually out, walking 3 or 4 miles a day, which I hope it's the latter. But if it's the former, then, it's like, well, I want to have some options available to me. And I would imagine that most individuals with elderly parents or aging parents need to figure that out. And, I think what your service and what you guys offer certainly can help navigate those unfamiliar waters.
That is so correct. And I really appreciate you sharing personally, where you even find yourself in this conversation. This is why I love that our services are really flexible in the way of not only maybe working with Purview Life right now, just to have a consultation, just to educate you in that role of possible caregiver, decision maker, and son, and educate yourself and be prepared yourself for the things that may come up with mom. Because of course, even though she's not physically here, she's going to be part of the conversation when you consult with us, so that then when anything happens or you find yourself having to be in that decision-making role, you feel educated yourself on just even the different types of services that they are and when they may be needed and what they do. Because whatever is available here in Northwest Arkansas and whatever we learn from a consultation with Purview Life here in Northwest Arkansas can still be translated to Pittsburgh, where she is, because there's going to be resources there. There's going to be a care manager that we can find through the Aging Life Care Association there. You're going to have boots on the ground there that will back up, and everything that we talked about here in Northwest Arkansas with Purview Life can come to fruition. So I love not only this resource and the concept that it is, especially when we're hands-on and assisting families and individuals, but the education and the preparedness is so crucial. In 14 years that I've been working senior care, I can't count how many times I've had to step in and we're in crisis mode. We are past the point of assigning a medical POA. We are already hospitalized. We're discharging to rehab. We're past the point of aging in place at home. And now we have to have the hard conversation about facility care. The dementia diagnosis it was always kind of there. We were told 6 years ago. Now my mom's wondering. Now the police are involved. Like, I can't tell you how many scenarios of like, I wish you would have called me 2 years ago. I wish you would have called me 6 months ago. But it's okay. You've called me now. We can help now. But I love what you shared personally, because it's starting that conversation. And again, we understand how sensitive these conversations are. Nobody wants to have them. I don't want to talk about being old. I don't want to talk about my parents being old.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to happen to my neighbor, because I love her to death. And I want her to be the spicy neighbor that she is right now. I love her. So no, we don't want to talk about these things. It's the same with, even pre-planning for our own affairs or trying to think about caring for a family member or an individual. It's not a great conversation to have. No one wants to have it, but it is needed. If I can communicate anything, it's needed. it is a reality. It's that dripping faucet in the background, and then you're going to find yourself in front of a fire hydrant. So the preparedness, the education, just having the conversation, I promise you, it brings so much. As maybe anxiety ridden as starting the conversation will be, it will bring a lot of peace and clarity, and preparedness is everything. It's right down to the saying that we all know, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And it's a sensitive conversation to have, but knowledge is power.
Well, listen, I mean, you are, and again, I've always tried to be transparent on my podcast because I think, you never know what other people are going through, right? And I'm sure there's somebody that's going to be listening to this that's like, you know what? I'm glad Randy shared that. I need to so-and-so for my father or for my mother or whomever. And so you're just giving me a lot of food for thought and a lot of things to think about. I would be curious to know, and well, first of all, let me just ask you, what is your business model? How does that work? So like if I came to you next week and I said, hey, Cherie, we had an amazing podcast conversation, but I really do need your help with my mom. Here are some of the things that I'm looking at. Here are some of the things that I'm thinking about. I mean, in the back of my mind, I've thought about moving my mom here to Arkansas, but she's a Pittsburgh girl and that's where she was born and raised. And so it's one of those things where I've got to kind of reconcile those two things, but I also want to make sure I'm doing the right thing by my mother. Right. And so, and like you said something very, very important, that we don't want to be making knee-jerk decisions where because of situations and circumstance, we are forced to be making a decision.
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
So it's so proper planning is definitely prevents us from having to do things at the last minute.
It's going to make a hard situation even harder and more uncomfortable when we are trying to, again, you find yourself in that crisis mode and you're scrambling and just pulling the trigger on resources and decisions that have to be prepared for and thought out. And then again, as I mentioned before, a lot of emotions tied into that, difference of expectations.
Yeah.
You have to think too, you as the son, and then in relation to your mom, you are her child. This is your mother. You guys are going to have emotional connection that could even convolute things even above and beyond that. You're trying to do right by her. She's resisting your decisions, even though you feel like they're right. You're in crisis mode. It can become very messy. And that is the blessing of a care manager, whomever that may be. Right. Again, that could be even outside of Purview Life. That can be that third party that comes in and quiets all of that chaos and all of that noise. And if I haven't said it enough, I feel like I'm overusing the word expertise, but I can't play on that word enough because, but a clarity would be another word that I would put in there as well. And even mediation of, okay, this is the right decision to make. And that it is. The healthcare providers are saying so. The care manager saying so. And mom is resistant. This is the worst case scenario for her. That has to have some hand holding. That has to have some compassion to have those conversations and make that tradition or make that transition. And then that's a lot to put on that family caregiver. They've had to make the decision and now they have to carry the burden and the weight of it. And that's some unnecessary suffering. And that is our goal at Purview Life. And that's the goal overall with care managers, is there should not be any unnecessary suffering, whether it's decisions, it's a transition, or it's just that conversation of the reality of you have a diagnosis and this is where you are right now. We respect who you were and you're still that person. But here's the reality of where we are right now. And let's navigate through that the best that we can, bringing as much comfort, understanding, and the best quality of life that we can, no matter the situation that we're facing. Just a couple of years ago, we updated our tagline for Purview Life, and we changed it to adding life to years. It might not always be appropriate to add years to life, depending on the situation, the diagnosis, the overall situation or season for a person. But adding life to the years that we have, that's our number one goal.
Yeah. I love that. Explain to me your business model. How does it work? If
Sure.
and like, look, like, and again, I'm just going to put myself in that chair. If I
Sure.
came to you next week and said, "Hey, I love the podcast. I think I need your help." How does that work? Am I paying you for your services, or is that come from someplace else? I mean, my mom actually has amazing health care because she was a
Mm-hmm.
teacher for 35 years in New Jersey, and her health care, she's got the gold standard. She's one of those people that the hospital sees her coming a mile away because they're like, oh, she's got everything. So we'll make sure we order
Good.
all these tests because we know that we'll get compensated for that. And I mean,
Good.
that's unfortunately is a more of an indictment of our healthcare system than anything. But the bottom line is
Yeah.
she's got the Cadillac of healthcare coverage. And
Good.
that's something that I'm extremely thankful for. But I'm just curious to know from your perspective, well, how does your business model work if I come to you and say, hey, I need your help with my aging parents?
Sure. We are a fee-for-service organization. We are private pay. Care management is not a concept or a resource that is noticed yet by any kind of insurance, Medicare, not even Medicaid. So unfortunately, we are out of pocket. But fortunately, we have established ourselves where there is a lot of different ways to utilize us. So just because it's going to be out of pocket service, don't let anybody think that this is unobtainable. So for you as example, if you come, you're going to speak to me directly. We're going to kind of do an intake process. We're first going to have a conversation again with somebody local here in the community that will stay on the phone with you for 10 minutes, for an hour, or for 2 hours and talk about your situation as a whole and make sure that really we can be utilized, we can step in, we can help. Because if this is going to be out of pocket, let's make sure that that this is a service that we need to utilize. We have a lot of different options, which could be a one-time consult for a one-time fee. And that's face-to-face with the registered nurse, the care manager that can formulate a care plan, that can organize that to-do list, that can give education and resources, really set you up for success. And if that's all you can afford and that's all you can do, then we know that we've had a beneficial conversation with you and we've set you on the right path.
Yeah.
We have one-time setup fees for our other services, like serving as someone's medical POA. So again, a one-time fee that puts us in that role. And then a very small annual fee after that, where we come and face-to-face check in with you one time a year and make sure that we're all, again, that we're just continuing the conversation. We're continuing to be in your back pocket. We're putting eyes on you. We're putting eyes on the home. We're putting eyes on anything that you may have going on, and that nothing has changed. Nothing else further needs to be addressed, because that's a really important role. And we want to continue to be in that role. We don't want to do that blindly. Other than that, our services are ongoing and billed by the hour. But an interesting thing about our hourly rate is we bill in 6-minute increments. So when we make a phone call for a resource, when we solve a problem that we can do very efficiently because we're experts in our field, where it may be a 3-hour phone call for you, it could be a 30-minute phone call for us. We know who to call. We know when to call.
Time is money.
And so, and that's what I love about our services as well is, time is money. Yeah. And so a lot of times families retain us just because they're like, okay, we understand you could do this a lot more efficiently. And I'm working a full-time job and my kid's got soccer at 3. And then my other kid has baseball at 4. And I don't have the time to sit on the phone. I know my mom needs this. I'm educated about that enough. But I don't know how to navigate through that. So again, we could be that expert that, again, we're in the back pocket of someone to be like, to just delegate to worst case scenario and be efficient at it. And I love that we bill in those 6-minute increments, because that 3-hour phone call that's done in 30 minutes, that's actually pretty affordable once you see it broke down on the invoice. That's one thing I love about our billing is every invoice is detailed. So folks not only know what we do, but then they see it in black and white once they've invested in our services. They see the date, the task that was completed, how long it took, and then the charge that coincides with that after we've billed in the 6-minute increments. So when we talk to folks and say our hourly rate, I'm like, don't be scared. We base our hourly rate off that national average. That's why we're part of the Aging Life Care Association. We just don't make a number up. We follow kind of what the national average is, but it can be very affordable.
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, so tell me this, because I know that like if a person has like an FSA, a flexible spending account, which does allow them to pay for certain needs for dependent care, including parents, would some of your fees fall under that for flexible? Okay.
So again, that would be part of the conversation that we would have with an individual.
Sure.
Again, we are private pay.
Yep.
And so we're not going to be covered by insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid. But when we're talking to a veteran who may have aid and attendance, that's a whole different conversation.
Okay.
With a healthcare savings account, even long-term care policies. I've reviewed long-term care policies. We got a referral out of the Siloam Springs area once where the gentleman had me review his parents' long-term care policy, and it said it would cover nurses' visits, an actual registered nurse coming out. So I told him, I said, you do a high-level consultation, you're face-to-face with my care manager, who is a licensed registered nurse.
Yeah.
I see all the boxes checked.
Yeah.
So he scheduled a high-level consultation for the one-time fee that we charge. We completed it. We submitted him notes from our visit. We came and did it in person. He turned it into his long-term care policy. They reimbursed him for the consultation.
Wow. Okay.
Because it was a visit in person by a registered nurse.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of workaround on resources that could cover us.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario might be out of pocket.
I got you. Okay. Well, that's perfect. Well, Cherie, you've given us a lot to think about. You've given me a lot to think about. And I hope that our listeners can appreciate the level of expertise and depth that you've brought to this conversation. So I really want to thank you. If people are listening to this and they're like, I probably need to have a conversation with Cherie. I need to maybe meet with somebody on her team because she seems well connected with all of the elder law attorneys, the facilities, and all the community resources that are here in Northwest Arkansas in my backyard. And oh, by the way, if I have somebody, a family or relative that's not here, she probably knows who I should be contacting in another place. So there's a lot of value in having that initial conversation. So I want to encourage people to reach out. But if anybody wants to reach out to you, Cherie, what's the best way for them to do it?
Sure. I love our website, not only because it does a great job of breaking down verbally what we do and the concept of our services. So that's purviewlife.com. But also there's some testimonial videos embedded within our website as well. So you can see professionals and individuals that have utilized our services and kind of get some of that storytelling on what that looked like. Other than that, our local phone number is 479-579-8723. It rings right into me to kind of do that inquiry and intake process and see if we would even be a good fit. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes I'll get, folks that'll call and say, here's the backstory and here's where we're at now and here's what I need. And I'm like, oh, I don't know that you're appropriate for care management yet. Sounds like you just need some help with transportation or companion care. And maybe you're in the very early stages of trying to navigate this. So let me point you in the right direction, but keep me in your back pocket because things will progress, And so that's a great place to start, just to call, or it's a number that you can text. So if you have questions, is this a right fit? Do we need to talk to you now? Do we need to talk to you now and use you later? We can have that whole conversation and they can reach us directly. And then depending on the conversation and what the best next steps are, then they may meet with our care managers or at least learn what we do and know when to utilize us. We do have a presence in Bentonville as well. So we like to meet folks where they're at. So if we're going to do a consult or a meet and greet, it's beneficial to see them in their environment, whether that's facility, communities, or in their personal homes. But that's not comfortable to everyone. That may not be appropriate for every situation. Sometimes folks are like, again, my dad's having cognitive issues. I think this conversation may be overwhelming for him. I would like to come and meet with you guys first. And so We have some office space in Bentonville, and we have some conference room space available where folks can also meet with us. But that main 479-579-8723 number is the best way to reach us directly, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we put all of that in the show notes. But Cherie Clark, thank you so much for coming on and really sharing the work that you're doing. Certainly, I would imagine that this type of work can be taxing, just not emotionally taxing. And so at times, and so I want to applaud that the vocation that you've chosen, because not everybody's cut out to do the kind of work that you do. And so
I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you letting me share my personal story at the very beginning. Like I said, I feel like I was put in that caregiver role for a reason. I had no idea that it would turn into a profession, but I cannot imagine myself doing anything else. And so if that even brings some comfort to folks, that I am a Northwest Arkansas native, and I've sat on the other side and watched my father navigate through that process and navigated through it myself with family members. I hope that brings some kind of comfort and ease, because again, these are emotional conversations. They're hard conversations to have, but you will get a listening ear. You will get somebody that I haven't walked in your shoes, but I have walked in my own shoes on the same path. And so even if you just need a sounding board, that's what we're here for. And it's a real blessing to be able to bring that to my community. And I appreciate you giving me another platform just to communicate that out to the awesome community that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, you hit it on the head. And this is one of those evergreen episodes that will be as valid 5 years from now as it is today. So we really appreciate, we really appreciate you, Cherie Clark, for coming to join us from Purview Life NWA. Folks, to learn more at purviewlife.com, just go to their website. Again, purviewlife.com, PURVIEW life.com. And the Aging Life Care Association, you can learn more about them as well. We'll put a link to their website on our show notes to understand the standards and find professionals. And then we'll link to everything that we've discussed today, including the phone number and all of Cherie's information. We really appreciate you listening to this special episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. We cover the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and I would say that this topic today falls under life. And so with that being said, we really appreciate it. We'll be back here next week with another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. We'll see you soon. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.